Thank you again for coming. This is part one of our three-part series, What Every Parent Needs to Know About Early Reading. And feel free, if you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat and say what brings you here today, you're welcome to. I'm Beth Cosentino. I'm the SPANS project director for the New Jersey Tiered System of Supports Early Reading Project. I'm also on the START project team as the project coordinator. Right. So we're going to do a little housekeeping. Before we begin, please be advised that there is closed captioning available. So locate the live transcript button on the control bar and click on Show Subtitle to activate closed captioning as described on the slide in front of you. Oh, I don't know. Deborah, will you move over to the next slide? Deborah's got control of our. There we go. Thank you. So just take a moment if you need this. All right, and now we'll move on to talking about our agenda and goals for today. So I'm going to give a brief overview of the SPAN Parent Advocacy Network, and then we'll do a quick poll. I'll introduce our guest presenter, Deborah Lynam, who's with us here today, and she'll talk about the framework for the New Jersey Tiered System of Supports for Early Reading. And after that, she'll take us through information about the Universal Screener, assessments and progress monitoring. Then we'll have time to take any questions you may have, and we'll share questions for you to ask your child's teacher, or if you're an educator, just to be better informed. Then we'll share some resources and provide you with a link to a reflection form. And upon completion of the form, you'll receive a link to a resource folder that will give you access to today's workshop resources, and including a PDF and recording of this presentation. So let's get started. So who is SPAN? Since 1987, families in New Jersey and beyond have made SPAN their first stop for support and resources. Today, SPAN's projects and programs from parents of children from birth to age 26 and for women of childbearing age have expanded from a kitchen table to over 40 national, regional, and local programs funded by government agencies, state, federal, and local, foundations, and fee-for-service contracts. These programs cover education, health and mental health, human services, child care, and child welfare. SPAN's vision is that all families will have the resources and support they need to ensure that their children become fully participating and contributing members of our communities and society. Our mission is to empower and support families and inform and involve professionals interested in the healthy development and education of children and youth. Our motto, empowered parents, educated, engaged, effective. All right, so now I'm going to launch this poll. Let me see where it is. All right, to just get a little bit of some information from you all before Deborah starts. Let me know when you see it. Okay, is it up there? Yes. So there are two questions. How you're joining us today. And there we go. Now it's filling in. And how you would rate your understanding of early reading skill assessments. So anything from having no idea to totally understanding them. So thank you for participating. We're at almost 100% participation, so that's great. I will end the poll here in just a minute and share the results. Okay. So let's say, okay, so we have 4 parents and 4 educators, 3 or both, 3 or other. And for our rating, we have people, let's see. We have
Knowledgeable group.
a knowledgeable group. Yes.
Yeah, awesome.
Very good. Very good. All right. Well, thank you for participating. Can you see it, the results? Let me make sure I'm sharing them. Let's see. All right. So just so you have an idea of where we all are coming from today, and that's very helpful for us. So I'm going to now let Deborah Lynam take over. Actually, I'm going to introduce her and then I'm going to let her take over. Deborah Lynam is currently pursuing a doctoral degree in childhood studies at Rutgers University, Camden, while serving as a graduate student for the university's Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology's statewide initiative, New Jersey Tiered System of Supports for Early Reading. Deborah is the parent of 3 children, 2 of whom are dyslexic, and has been active in mobilizing state and federal level dyslexia awareness and advocacy efforts for over a decade. She's a member of the National Center for Improving Literacy's Family Engagement Advisory Board and a former START Project parent group specialist here at SPAN. We are so pleased to have her with us today. All right, Deborah, now take it away.
Awesome. And I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. And I also want to thank everyone for filling out that poll because it's really helpful for me to see what role you're bringing to today's presentation. And then also I'm super excited to see that many of you feel confident in your understanding of early reading assessments. So what I hope to achieve today is talk to you a little bit about how families and educators can work together and communicate around this idea of reading assessment and literacy data that we may want to use as we're talking about our child's areas of strength and then areas for potential supports. So what I would like to do is just give everyone a grounding in what the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support framework is. And then I'll talk a little bit about our initiative at Rutgers that focuses this multi-tiered systems model on early reading prevention. So this triangle you've probably seen if you've been at other SPAN workshops where we're focused on this tiered systems of support idea. So this is our New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support triangle. And here you can see that around the 3 sides of the triangle, we really talk about the drivers that are necessary to have a school or district context that's ready to provide these levels of intensified support to students. So first, it takes a district and a school leadership team that have made a commitment to doing the systems level work that it's going to take to organize all of the resources and the personnel and the funding and all the different aspects that need to come together to make sure that early reading is a priority in our community. Next, it takes work that's devoted to a positive school culture and climate. So this is really in the area of early reading, we would be talking about that commitment across all stakeholders, that a preventative model of early reading is what we're all committed to, and that we're committed to it with a level of equity. So it's not enough to just say that our overall our students are making improvements in early reading, but are each of our individual student demographic groups also showing that same level of progress? So students with disabilities, students from different ethnic backgrounds, language related constructs, things like that. Are we making sure that we're paying attention to the early reading development of all of our students? And then finally, this is where SPAN comes into our work, is family and community engagement. This is a really critical part of tiered systems of support. And SPAN is the organization that has been working closely with us at Rutgers on this, how do we bring the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support framework and the information that is contained within that framework that schools and educators are getting access to. How are you as families getting information about what this tiered model is all about? So from there, this idea of multi-tiered systems of support, it basically means that we're thinking about what all students are getting at a universal level. So in tier 1, what do all of our students need to have access to? And then at tier 2, whoops, and then at tier 2 and 3, it's about, in addition to that tier 1 supports, what do students need that would be more targeted to their skill needs? So tier 2 might be happening in small group interventions because a group of kids need these types of supports and services. And then there's even a level above that, which could be more intensive. Maybe this is more time in an intervention for a particular student, or maybe it means that their intervention support is happening at an individual one-on-one level. So that's kind of the construct of New Jersey tiered systems of support. And then here is how we think about it at the NJTSS Early Reading Project. We talk about this work needing to happen in terms of data-informed instruction. So there's a whole system of assessment that is set up around priority early reading skills that's going to help us make decisions about what children need in their intervention planning that is directly related to what the data is telling us about their skill needs. So let's just do a quick overview of this. And then what I want to do in today's workshop is present you a scenario of a family that is in a district that is utilizing an NJTSS-ER model. And we're going to see how that relationship plays out between the family getting information and the school, how the school's relaying that information. But first, I want to give you a really good understanding of what this model is grounded in. So here we see universal screening. This is a quick assessment that is given to all students in a school district. This is regardless of whether you're in general education or special education, or whether you are a bilingual student, or whatever the case may be. All students in a district are being universally screened for priority early reading skills that are shown to be predictive for your particular grade span. And these are quick. These are little 5 to 10 minute, like take a temperature, take your blood pressure. The information is just there to tell us whether the instruction that you've been provided to date has built the skills that we would be expecting to see you have, okay? And then the tier 1 instruction is what all students are receiving, right? So the universal screening is checking to see if this instruction that everybody is getting, how is it meeting everybody's needs? So it's going to just kind of tell us the students that are making good gains in tier 1, but then who are the students that tier 1 has not been enough? So we are going to need to do more work with those students. And those students who are showing they are not yet meeting the universal screening benchmarks, they're going to receive those additional tiers of support. So they may get small group instruction, they may need individualized intervention support, but this is what is happening in addition to tier 1 for those students in tiers 2 and tiers 3. Now, all students in tier 1, so everybody that's receiving their reading instruction in the general ed classroom, is always going to be progress monitored using kind of grade level skill mastery assessments. These are things that are embedded in the reading program that your school is using. So students may work through a unit, and then they get to the end, and that reading program has a unit assessment, or maybe the teacher is creating a quick little inventory to just see what have students learned from this unit and what do they still need support in. That's happening across the board for everybody. But the students who through universal screening, we're showing that actually hasn't been enough. We're still leaving them at risk because we haven't built up the skills to where they need to be at this point in time. Those students that do not benchmark on the universal screener, those are going to be kids that we take a closer look at. So they are going to be given a diagnostic inventory in whatever area the universal screener has shown that they're having a little bit of a weakness in. And then that diagnostic data is going to be what helps inform our intervention plans for those students. And then those students that get intervention plans in tier 2 or tier 3, their progress monitoring is going to be very specific to the skills that they need to work on. So they'll still be in tier 1. They're still going to be having those grade level like assessments at the end of each unit that's happening for all kids. But if they're also in a tier 2 or a tier 3 support, there's going to be more individualized progress monitoring that's going to be given on a regular basis so that we can ensure that those interventions are working, that the student is responding to the specific supplementary supports that we're putting in place. So that's the overview, okay? If you have any questions, jot them down because we can talk more. We can bring up that diagram again at the end and we can talk more about it if you have questions. But now I want to dive into a little student scenario. So I want you to meet Tarek. Tarek is a first grader and he's in a school district, and his school district utilizes the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support Early Reading Model. So since this is a simulated a little storyline that we're going to go into right now, I need you to understand, whether you're an educator or a parent, that we have to understand that New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support Early Reading is a process. So a district or a school that is undergoing this work, they're putting in place these core components that I just introduced, but they may be rolling them out over time. So at any given point in the school process, a district may be still working on, improving their tier 1 instruction, or maybe they are just getting to learn about better ways that they can do student grouping work or intervention planning. So understand, I'm presenting a best case scenario in terms of a district that has been really committed to the work, and let's say that they have it in a fully implemented state of being. But what you can take from this, number one, from a parent perspective, is what kind of questions can I go back and start talking to my school about? Because my child's in the system right now, right? So regardless of what stage you're at in getting this put in place, my child is a developing reader at this point, and I have some questions that I need to ask about their skill development. Now, if you're an educator listening to this workshop, I hope that you take away some ideas for how you can engage families in the work that you're doing around a tiered model in real time. So hopefully from this workshop, you'll get some ideas about what your family engagement work can look like in your tiered systems of support model. Okay, so universal screener, right? We're at the very beginning of a tiered systems of support model. So Tarek's family was well prepared for this universal screening report to come home. Their district had, knowing that they were moving to an MTSS model and that they were using the New Jersey model of early reading, they held a family literacy night. And they prepared all of the parents to understand that they were going to be receiving a report. This district chose to use DIBELS as their universal screening tool. So they prepared parents to understand that they were going to get this report sent home that was going to talk to them about their child's universal screening results. And that from there, their child was going to receive some intervention support. So when Tariq's family got the DIBELS report, they understood what it meant to see, the beginning of the year data and how that related to whether Tariq was well below goal, on goal, or above goal. So this did not come as a shock to Tarek's family. They were anticipating that this report was coming home, and they had some experience in reading the report and kind of understanding what it was telling them. This family literacy night, this is the type of content that was shared with Tarek's family. So they understood that there was a progression of assessments that could be used to look at foundational early reading skill development across grade spans K to 3. So for example, in kindergarten, it's really important to look at a student's ability to fluently name the letters of the alphabet, to have a certain level of phonemic awareness, and then also phonics and decoding skills. So letter naming, this is typically done in a universal screener as a fluency measure. So a student is given 30 seconds or 60 seconds, 1 minute to name as many of the upper or lowercase letters as they can. And the reason this is part of a universal screening is because the research has shown that letter naming is a highly predictive skill of later reading skill development. So just having a kindergarten student who can quickly and accurately name letters is an indicator, right? It's like that taking a temperature that this child's skill development is right where it needs to be. So they were expecting that they would see, how is Tariq doing in that area? Does he know his letter names? In phonemic awareness, this is actually also highly, highly predictive in kindergarten and in first grade. So typically phonemic awareness can be understood as an awareness that an individual child has that the sounds in the words that they say are connected to the kind of letters in the words that they see in print. So it's an understanding that words have sounds and those sounds are individual units in words. That's phonemic awareness. It's part of a larger construct, but when we're talking about reading, we're talking about the individual sounds in words, and then how that connects to reading and spelling is that it connects to the letters or the letter patterns in words. So we need to check if students can actually identify those individual sounds in words. So in a universal screening test, typically this is done through a measure of phoneme segmentation fluency. So I'm going to give you an example here and you can kind of practice. I'm going to say a word and I want you to count how many sounds you hear in that word. Okay. So the word is flip. So just say that word to yourself, flip. How many sounds do you think are in that word? Put them in the chat. I'd like to see. Flip. How many sounds do you think are in that word? I see 3, I see 4, 3, 4. Okay, let's do it together. You ready? Ul, I. There are 4 phonemes or 4 sounds in that word. So in this universal screening test, what happens is a student is given a series of words and they have to segment all of the sounds in that word. So the correct answer on a phoneme segmentation fluency task would have been for the student to say, ul, I, and then that tells us that that student can hear all 4 of those sounds in that word. And then last is the phonics and the decoding piece. And typically this is done through a measure of nonsense word fluency. Now, sometimes this idea that we're going to be using nonsense words with children makes people get kind of like, oh my goodness, like why aren't we giving them real words? How is this connected to reading? But what we know about nonsense word fluency as an assessment measure is it allows us to really look at the child's discrete skill of actually knowing a letter sound connection and then being able to use those letter sound connections to sound out a word. So we're knowing that since these are made up words, it is a measure of how well a child has memorized words or how well a child has like recognized a word on sight. What it's telling us is the student can use their letter sound knowledge to actually sound out unknown words. So a typical task might look like the student being shown the word FIP, right? And the student sees FIP and has to look at that and either say it or can look at it and instantly say FIP. Right? So it's a made up word, but they're demonstrating us that they can use their letter sound knowledge to sound out a word that maybe they don't instantly recognize. Okay, so that's what the early phonics and decoding measure would be all about. So those 3 things would be what you're looking for if you have a kindergarten student. But remember, Tariq was a first grade student. So his family was prepared to understand what those scores meant in those three areas, but there was an additional area that was going to be included in Tarek's scores, and that was oral reading fluency. Oral reading fluency means that a student is reading a passage, right? So it's connected text, not just individual words, but they're reading a little story, no pictures. And then from that, what we're looking at is the student accurately reading all of the words in that story? And at what rate are they reading? So how many words per minute are they reading correctly? Okay, so that information becomes highly predictive in about the middle of first grade. Okay, so that was when you should start to be getting those scores. January timeframe, you should start to see those kind of measures coming into the report. And then finally, second grade or above, or let's just second grade, that is when you're going to start to see these universal screeners add in a measure of comprehension. And that's because so much of being able to comprehend what you read is grounded in these foundational early reading skills around decoding and word recognition, that comprehension comes into the mix as being highly predictive a little bit later. Once children really have a grasp of these underlying foundational skills, then you can be assured that they can read the words on the page. So what they're understanding when they're reading is, more about looking at how they're making sense and making meaning. It's not so dependent on the words being read accurately. So you see that come in about second grade. And then that carries through to third grade and beyond. So at this workshop, all of that it was explained to Tarek's family. So they were ready to get his report coming home, and they were looking for those, since it was the beginning of the year, they were going to be looking for those first three skills, and they knew to come was going to be that oral reading fluency score once he hit middle of the year. Now, the district also explained what was going on in terms of their Tier 1 core reading instruction. So the district has been doing this work for a while, and they had been really analyzing their core instruction to make sure that it was representing all of the big ideas in beginning reading instruction. So there have been decades and decades of research that have looked at what are the components of effective reading instruction that need to be present in all reading instruction for all students, not just for kids that need intervention or kids that need a little bit of support in special education, but what actually needs to be a part of our reading instruction for all kids so that we can ensure that they have access to all of those skills that need to be building over time. And this handout that you see here comes from the National Center for Improving Literacy, and it talks about those 5 really critical components. So phonemic awareness, remember I said this is the ability to understand that words in print are made, or words that we hear, are made up of individual sounds, and that we can manipulate those sounds in different ways to make different words. And then the connection from that phonemic awareness into the printed word is our phonics work, right? So it's understanding that the printed words connect to those individual sounds, and there are individual letters or letter combinations in words that we need to pay attention to. Then there's reading fluency, which gets at that oral reading fluency, right? Like when I'm reading a sentence or a passage, do I sound very natural? Is my rate, going to be like conversational so that I actually can be using my abilities to make meaning from what I'm reading, because I'm not reading too slowly or maybe choppily because I'm having still difficulties sounding out different words and things. But reading fluency is like I'm starting to put it all together, and now I'm reading in a way that's going to allow me to make meaning more easily. And then vocabulary and comprehension strategy work, right? So understanding that students also, while they're learning how to sound out words and spell words, we also have to be building up their vocabulary so that when they sound out that word, they're like, oh yeah, That's that word. I know that word. Because it is possible that you could sound out a real life word and you don't have never heard that word before, or you don't know what that word means. So there'd be no way for you to tell whether you pronounced it properly or whether that's the correct word in the story that you're reading. So we have to be building up students' vocabulary knowledge at the same time, and then also their comprehension strategy work. So we have to be giving young kids access to literature that they probably wouldn't be able to read by themselves yet, but the teacher should be doing read alouds and exposing them to picture books and doing lots of, talking about, different sentence structures that might be more complex than the way we generally talk when we're in conversation with people. So all of that work has to be part of your core reading instruction also. There is a theoretical model of reading that a lot of this work is grounded in, and it's called the simple view of reading. And this research came out in the 1980s, and there has been a ton of research that has validated this model. So we can feel pretty confident that this is a way of thinking about how good skilled reading develops in young children. So what this is saying, it's a multiplication equation. So that's the word I was looking for, an equation. So I want you to pay particular attention to this being multiplication, right? Not addition. It's not decoding skills plus language comprehension is going to give you good reading comprehension. What it's actually saying is decoding skills, whatever level of decoding skill a child is at, is going to be multiplied by their language comprehension abilities. And so if one of these areas is strong, but the other one is weak, it's going to produce weak reading comprehension. And vice versa. So let's think this through. Let's say that 0 is going to be weak. You have a weakness in this component, and a 1 will be you're strong in that component. But we know that it's never going to be all or none, right? It's always going to be somewhere in between. Like somebody might have, 0.75 and a 1.5. They're extra good in a certain area. But let's just use 1 and 0 as a way to keep this really simple and to think about it. So if a student has decoding skills, right, that are really strong, they can sound out all of these words, they can read them on sight, but their language comprehension has some areas of weakness. Maybe they don't have a really strong vocabulary, or when they're listening to a picture book being read to them or whatever, they're not always making some of the inferences that they need to be making about what's happening in that story. If we take the strong 1 of decoding and we times it by the 0, which is the weakness in language comprehension, we can see that the answer would be 1 times 0 equals 0. So we know that that weak language comprehension is going to have an impact on their ability to make meaning when they're reading themselves. When they're reading a book for themselves, that language comprehension issue is going to cause some problems. Now think about the other piece of this. What if their weakness is actually in reading the words on the page, right? They have to spend so much energy just trying to figure out what those words are that they really slow themselves down, okay? So we have a 0 here on decoding. But if they were to hear that story, if someone read that book to them, oh my goodness, they understood everything. They could make meaning. It made total sense because they knew all the vocabulary. They could make the connections that were needed. The thing that was holding them back is they can't read those words on their own. So again, then we would see a 0 in decoding multiplied by a 1 or even more, right, in their language comprehension skills. But again, in the end, if they're asked to read something on their own, their reading comprehension is going to be impaired. So this model, in as simple as it is helpful for thinking about why we have all of those core components of Tier 1 reading instruction. But I have to say, it's really in real life not as simple as this. In each of these areas, in decoding, There's a lot of little discrete skills that go into building good decoding skills. And the same can be said about language comprehension. There are a lot of individual skills that have to build up to get to strong language comprehension. So from there, and imagine now that this has all been discussed at this family literacy night, and Tariq's parents now understand that Tariq's reading skill development is depending on both of these things, right? His early decoding skills, those foundational skills, as well as building up his language comprehension. So they know that this instruction is happening for him in the classroom. So when they got Tariq's universal screening report, the area that showed that he was in need was that nonsense word fluency. Okay, so when Tariq's parents looked at that report, they realized that his area of need was his ability to make letter sound connections, right? And then use those letter sound connections to blend together and read words. So the district identified that need in Tariq and other students, and they gave those students a diagnostic phonics inventory. So here you see the quick phonics screener. And what this tool does is it presents to Tariq all of these basic letter sound connections and word patterns that a first grader should be able to show a skill set in. Okay, so it's much deeper than the universal screener, which is just taking a temperature check. So if we think about that universal screener as like a blood pressure test, the diagnostic is like now doing blood work, right? So we're going a little bit deeper. We're going to dive into all of the individual skills that go into decoding skills, and we're going to see exactly what areas are causing the difficulty for Tariq. So here's his diagnostic results. And let me look without my glasses here. So it looks like we see that Tariq is really beginning to start to break down when he's working with short vowel sounds, and then also when we see words that have consonant digraphs in them. So his teacher now has this information. We know exactly where we need to start targeting intervention. And it's decided that Tariq is going to go into a tier 2 intervention. And he's going to be in a small group because there are other kids that have very similar skill needs. And Tariq's group is going to work on those skills that were identified in his diagnostic data. So they decided that he was going to be in a group of 3 students, and they were going to get 3 30-minute intervention sessions per week. And it was going to target accurately learning the letter sound knowledge that they need around those short vowel sounds and the consonant digraphs. Okay, so then he goes off and he starts his intervention, and the team that is working with Tariq's group is going to be progress monitoring all of those students' results. So here you see a progress monitoring graph. So as Tariq and his friends are in their intervention and working on these skills, every week the teacher or the interventionist is giving a quick little progress monitoring assessment on how well students are building their understanding of letter sounds. Okay, so you can see every week we're getting in how many new letter sounds has Tariq progressed to, and it's going on this graph. So we're seeing it plotted. And then this is how his team is able to analyze his data to make sure that he is working towards his goal. So you see the goal over here on the right. This is where we need to get him to by the end of the intervention cycle. And every week we're closely watching how he's doing, so that if we see any problems, like Tariq's doing pretty well here, we're starting to see him really start to meet his goal aim line. But we may have seen that maybe he wasn't responding to intervention, and you could have seen kind of his data showing that, and that would have let his team know that, hey, we need to make a change here, right? 3 days a week is not working for Tariq. We need to give him 5 days a week with his 30-minute lessons. Or maybe they sent a coach in to observe the intervention lesson, and maybe they found out that the teacher was skipping over one of the activities in the intervention that could have really been benefiting Tariq. So the teacher got some coaching to say, you know what, let's really go back and like, let's deliver this like lesson in full. And then we can see if Tariq is going to be responding a little bit better to that data, right? To that intervention. So now I'm going to we just delivered a lot. We're going to take a little time here to do a review of what we've just delivered and then take some questions from all of you. So I introduced the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support framework, and this is a framework that delivers supports to students in a tiered manner, right? This could be used for anything, right? It could be reading, it could be behavioral supports, it could be math supports. We are talking today about the New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support Early Reading Framework, which is talking about using data-informed instruction to make decisions about early reading skill development. And that is done through these assessments and intervention tiers. We talked about what it means to be getting good, effective reading instruction and then being able to intensify that instruction in tiers of support. And then we also talked about the simple view of reading that helps us conceptualize these very important factors that both contribute to reading comprehension so that we know our students are getting good, effective instruction in both of these areas simultaneously. We talked about Tariq's outcome. So we looked at his universal screening data, which showed his family that he was having some mild difficulties in letter sound knowledge and being able to use letter sound knowledge to decode words. We looked at the results of his diagnostics assessment, which told us that his specific areas of need were those short vowel sounds and consonant digraphs, right? So a little bit more advanced skills than some of the simple one-to-one letter sound knowledge. We also looked at his Tier 2 intervention report and plan, and we can see exactly what his district is planning to do for him over this intervention cycle. So very, very clear information shared with Tariq's family. They know what's happening. And then an understanding of how that intervention is working. Is Tariq responding to it? Are we seeing progress? And we're able to see this in real time. So if there is an issue, we're not waiting 14 weeks to find out that he didn't reach his goal, but we maybe are going to get to the 6-week point, really analyze this data and make a decision whether what we're currently doing is working or whether we may need to make some adaptations so that Tariq can get back on track. So Beth, I don't have my chat up, so I'm going to ask for your assistance here to let me know if any questions are coming in. But I'd love to hear from folks to see what they're thinking about what was just presented and any thoughts they have on what's happening in their own districts or really anything.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet, but we'll give them a minute. Or feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to come off mute and ask the question. I will start actually. I just because I think this is like so much good information, and we're really focusing on the New Jersey Tiered System of Supports for Early Reading. But could you talk a little bit about if a district doesn't have or isn't using this method or this framework, what might they use? Can you just speak to that a little bit? Because people might go back and say, oh, is this something that we're using? And then it's like, well, maybe they're using a multi-tiered system, right? That there are other sort of labels, I would say, for lack of a better word, maybe.
Oh, sure. So yes. And this is a great point to make it a little bit more clear, right? So a multi-tiered systems of support model, like the little triangle that we're talking about, that's pretty generic. If your district is sort of saying, I'm using a multi-tiered system of support, it typically means that there's some level of assessment happening, and that data is being used to make decisions about placing children into kind of tiered intensifications, right? Whatever that might mean. And you would have to ask your district that question, what those tiers mean. How are children being placed into tiers, on what criteria, and then what's happening in those tiers. What I'm presenting on today is a model that's been developed at Rutgers University in collaboration with the Department of Education that really sets some guidelines and some best practices around what this should look like. So in New Jersey Tiered Systems of Support Early Reading is a resource that is available, but it is not a mandate. So districts may have a little bit of a different MTSS model in place. So the general things that I was talking about, like universal screener and then diagnostics and interventions, those are sort of constructs that will exist, but you would need to talk to your district specifically about what is the universal screener you're using, what diagnostics are you using when different skill areas are shown to have an area of concern, those types of questions. The other thing that's interesting in New Jersey is we actually do have a mandate for intervention and referral services, and a tiered system of support, or NJTSS-ER, if you're using that framework as it's designed, that actually is one way of meeting the intervention and referral services sort of mandate. So if your district is using one of these things, it could be the same thing as your intervention and referral services. But the one thing to kind of think about conceptually about what's different about those things is intervention and referral services really begins at the point of somebody making a referral, right? So it's a teacher or a family member sort of saying, hey, I think this student may be having some problems or some difficulties. Can we look more closely at what's going on? Where this model of MTSS or NJTSS-ER is really a preventative approach where it's analyzing the system to make sure everything is in place that needs to be in place. And then from the very start, it's looking to find the kids who may have those weaknesses. It's not waiting for them to not be doing well and then identifying them. It's tracking them at every step so that we can identify when we're starting to see something that could later turn into a more comprehensive problem. So it is a prevention model in a little bit of different way that intervention and referral services is framed as a support.
Okay, thank you. We do have now a couple of questions that came into the
Excellent.
chat. So, what suggestions? This looks like a two-part. What
Okay.
suggestions do you have for what questions parents can ask when they are told their child needs intervention? And then when does special education referrals come into play during this tiered system?
Super. Okay. So I think we're actually going to get into a little bit of the what questions parents can ask in the next couple slides, but I'll just generally say that information that I was sharing with you about the key priority areas, right? Think about those grade levels and the skills that are actually really important. And also think about what needs to be in reading instruction for all children, right? So you can start there with some of your questions, like number one, if they're told they need an intervention, what's causing the district to believe they need an intervention? So what data are they using and what skill area has been implicated? And then from there, you can say, well, how was that taught in core instruction, right? So they need an intervention in this. Well, tell me more about what you've tried already. So then you can understand what is going to be intensified, right? So going into a intervention means that something needs to be intensified for them. So you can start with those types of questions. And then when does special education referral come into play? Well, the first thing I need to say is this tiered model that we're talking about is for all students. So a child that has been found eligible for special education, they're still participating in all of these tiers. So perhaps they are found eligible and they are, decided that they need to have their reading instruction intensified through a small group intervention. their IEP could really stipulate that they're getting their they're getting their small group intervention in a tier 2 setting. It could be that they're in tier 3 and they need one-on-one intensive services, and that is where it's being delivered. So we really don't want to give off the thought that these multi-tiered systems are general ed and something different happens for special ed. This is the way we're structuring our system of supports, and all students have access to those systems of support. Now, in terms of identifying like a reading disability, the MTSS model is really, really helpful, because we all know that we can't determine whether a reading difficulty is a disability or not unless we can rule out the fact that evidence-based instruction has been delivered, right? That's the definition of a learning disability, that, you know, evidence-based instruction has been provided, and in light of that, the student is still struggling. So if you think about that progress monitoring data that I showed for TERIC, that would be the place that we're monitoring to see, like, they're delivering this evidence-based intervention. It's intense. It's being delivered as it should be, because we verified that it's being done with fidelity. And we're watching that TERIC is not able to meet the goals. That's a big red flag, right? We're giving him the best that we can give, and he's still not meeting his goals. Or we may see a student who consistently can meet his goals, but as soon as we take that tier 2 intervention away, he starts to regress again. So that's an indicator that this child needs that heightened level of intensification in order to be successful. So at that point, we might think about, how are we documenting that for this child? Because if my district is willing to provide this in a tier 2 setting, right, and these tier 2 interventions, if I move to a different district, and what if they don't operate with this level of intensified tier 2 support? How is it being documented that TERIC needs this to be successful? So you then could have options of a Section 504 plan being put in place, or maybe we can think about, are there other extenuating needs that would qualify under an IEP? So that really is the answer to that question, is the referral process and the identification process are going to use all of this data that is coming from the MTSS progress monitoring work.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here's another question. We have a couple more here. Can you speak about districts' approach to teaching reading? There seems to be a reassessment of their current practices. The same applies for reporting of students' progress in the early grades.
I'm not sure I fully understand the gist of the question, but the NJTSS-ER project does ask districts to do an evaluation of their instructional approach. So part of the work that districts do that undertake the resources available to them in our project is to take your universal screening data, look at that data across your school district, and say, what areas does it seem like our instruction is leaving kids at risk, right? So, so many kids are showing deficits in this area, so maybe we need to look at our instruction in that area. And then we have different tools available that districts can use, like a tier 1 core instructional analysis tool. So you can use that checklist and analyze the program that you're currently using to see if it has the characteristics of an evidence-based program. We also talk about needing to have a system where teachers have support and coaches are available, so that teachers can continually improve their practices in the classroom. I'm not sure if that's answering your question, Laura, so please clarify, but that there is a big emphasis in NJTSS to look at the systems that are happening to make sure that they're healthy.
And I'm going to add too, I think that and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Deborah, but the New Jersey State Learning Standards have been revised.
Yes.
So that there is the don't know, expectation, but
Yes.
of that there's certain things that weren't there before that tie in with these early reading skills, such as
Yes, for
phonemic. I think phonemic awareness, definitely.
Yes, there's been a lot of beefing up of the foundational early reading and writing skills. So
Mhm.
that's a wonderful. And those tools that I talked about at NJTSS-ER for doing that level of analysis, they've all been aligned to the new state standards.
Right.
So there's resources available if you're a district that's looking to do that level of work. And it's a very, very big part of the tiered model. And that's another way where it's a little bit different than intervention and referral services, because that process is really focused on just the individual child and kind of figuring out why there may be some areas of difficulty. But an NJTSS early reading model framework is really about checking the system and understanding how our whole system is either leaving kids at risk or happily meeting more and more kids' needs over time. So the individual child is not lost in that system, because I've shown you like the level of intervention planning and database decision making that's happening at the intervention level for each child. But it also puts a really important emphasis on the system itself and where that may be falling short or really excelling.
Thank you. All right, so we're getting close to 1 o'clock, and we have another question, and then we're going
Okay.
to share. We'll get to the next question, and then we might just kind of go quickly through the rest of these, because these are all the things that follow are going to be in the resource folder. So I want to make sure everybody has a chance to get to the evaluation too. All right, so do all New Jersey schools have access to reliable diagnostic assessments for phonics, comprehension, and other reading skills they should be developing in their grade?
Well, in New Jersey, all schools are allowed to choose for themselves what diagnostic assessments they may want to use. I will say, I'm thinking that this question may also be talking about universal screening, not just diagnostic inventory. So I'm going to answer it a little bit more broadly. So there are access to valid, reliable universal screeners that are free. Dibbles is one that comes to mind. You can download those materials from the University of Oregon's website. Now, they're all pencil and paper, and there's no data management system that comes along with them. So you would need to have a district set up that work for themselves. But do they have access? Yes. There are resources that are easily accessible either for free or for purchase. Districts could purchase a universal screening system. The same can be said for diagnostic assessments. Some can be found free online. We have a phonemic awareness inventory available through NJTSS-ER that districts could choose to use. Some of these diagnostic inventories are like a part of a book, so you could buy a book and have access to all of these different types of informal inventories. So yes, the access is there, but it is each district has the wherewithal to choose what's working in their district.
And Susan asked, is there an overview of the state ELA standard changes, identifying what changed or added, et cetera, you can provide or share a link to? I can find that, yes, and we can include that. We had the START project earlier in the year had a presentation on, and we had a literacy panel that Deborah participated in. And one of the things we went over was some of those changes. So I'm going to also include that recording of that panel, because you hear from a lot of different people on the state level that can explain some of these things too. So I'm just going to add the reflection form in case anybody has to jump off, because it's 1 o'clock now. But we'll walk through the rest of these slides. And, just so you know, we're going to have part 2. It's going to be in November. And I'll send out emails to everybody to remind to join us for that. We're going to look a little bit more deeply into interventions on that for that one. So here are the questions to ask. We again will share this information. The on the left side of the screen is from the National Center on Improving Literacy, and these are things that you can talk specifically about screening and assessment. And these questions on the right, again, are questions that Deborah and I talked about that would be helpful based on all these things that you've learned today that you could take to the teacher at the start of the year. And if you're an educator, to be thinking about, and like Deborah said, how to engage families. So I'm not going to read through them, but like I said, and then Deborah has talked quite a bit about the Rutgers training. So all of this information that she's talking about is available on their website. So there's a QR code, and there's the link, which will be in the PDF of this presentation.
Yep. So when you go to the website, check out the training tab, and you'll see that there are a whole library of online trainings, and they're geared towards educators, but I've had many parents that have commented that they were helpful for parents too.
Yes. And then SPAN's online library. So we've been doing, I've been working on this project, the early reading project, for a little over a year now. And we have collected some resources in our library, so including all of our presentations that we had last year. Deborah joined us for our preparation for parent-teacher conferences, and so those recordings are there. We have a checklist, we have a tip sheet for back-to-school night, and a few activities pages just for fun for you to do with your kids, and some other online resources that we've curated. Oops. And thank you again for joining us. Oh, no, let me tell you about
Sorry, I skipped too fast.
Yeah, so the START Engaging Parents of Students with Disabilities project has a literacy component. And we, a part of that component is we have a texting program where we send out a text about once a week with some information on some of these early literacy skills or information about events. There's also a partnership we have with the World Reader Book Smart app, which is an app that you can have on your phone that will give you books in a couple of different languages. And for each book, there is a few activities. So wherever you are, wherever you go, you can have a book there with you for you or your child to read. And then finally, we have every 2 months, the START project puts out a newsletter called The Bookshelf. So let me know if you're interested, and we will put you on that mailing list. And again, that provides you with some good information about early literacy skills. And she's asking some questions.
Yeah, what's the name of the app again?
The BookSmart app. So if you scan, this is going to be in our resource folder. If you scan that QR code, it takes you through to the SPAN BookSmart app. And then if they ask for a library code, which is a newer part to this, then you just put in SPAN, SPAN. So yes, thank you for all coming. Great questions. Thank you, Deborah.
Oh, thank you. I love doing these.
So knowledgeable. We are so appreciative. And access to the resource folder. I'm going to put the link for the evaluation. So once you fill out the reflection form, you'll get access right to the resource folder will give you access, or it'll give you access to that. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day.
And have a great end of summer.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stop recording.